Oh,
Put her back
too
up.
late.
Put her
Try
back
again.
up.
Yeah. Whoops.
And she takes off like a shot.
Oh, you gonna get up here? Gonna get up here? Gonna get up here? Gonna get up here? There you go.
Yeah, there you go. Look at the nose wrinkle up too. Yay, Caroline! Yay, Caroline! Yay! Go do your little dance, huh? Yeah. Go do our little dance. Yeah. We call it the monkey. Yeah, Grandpa does the gorilla. You do the monkey. Yeah. What you think, Max? Max likes, get me out of here. Oh.
Okay. In the Bettner family, we didn't have everything that other people had. We didn't have any electricity, and we didn't have any water other than a windmill, which pumped the water for the cattle. But we always had to go out to the well and pump the water with a hand pump. And in the wintertime, we had a big old round stove in the dining room that went up through the floor and into a chimney. And that was our heat upstairs. And downstairs in the kitchen, the only thing we had was a cook stove, which we fed with cobs and wood. So that's pretty much all the bedrooms was upstairs, so we all had to sleep up there. And of course, in the mornings when it was cold, you headed down the steps pretty fast. And that's about the deal with the house. Now we're going to start when I was 5 years old, and I remember milking my first cow with the pan held between my legs, and Dad had built me a stool that was tall enough so I could reach the cow and milk the udder out. And that was, well, there was 4 of us that milked. We didn't have no milking machine or anything like that because we didn't have any power. And I remember, getting up in the morning with the rest of them. Of course, we had to milk those cows before anybody went to school. And at 5 years old, it was kind of hard at times to get up, but I did. Because I kind of followed my 2 older siblings, which was my sister Virginia, called her Jen, and my brother Raymond, which we called Pat. And I remember one day, we always had an old brown cow. I think she was the oldest cow in the herd. And she'd come up, but the other ones wouldn't. We always had to go after the cows. And of course, we had a Holstein bull in there, which tended to be mean. So we always tried to figure out some way to get the cows up. Well, a lot of times we'd go down and find that old brown cow before she came up and ride her up with the cows, and the rest of the cows would kind of follow, once we was down there. And anyway, this one day they didn't come up, and she came up, and Pat says, well, let's put the saddle on the cow and I'll ride the cow down and bring the cows up. And I said, that's fine with me. He was probably 10 and I was probably 7. And so we had an English saddle, I remember putting this on the cow and cinched up the girth under the cow, and the cow didn't move a bit. And we had her in a stanchion, and Pat, he gets on the cow and he says, okay, let her loose. Well, that goddamn cow started to buck and jump up and down. And of course, about the time it hit the door to go out, Pat hit his head on the sill above and knocked him colder than cold. And I thought it killed him. And I knew if I had to go to the house and tell Mom and Dad, they would say, well, what did you do that for? You know, because that was always the thing. And we was always trying to do some kind of a stunt like that. But anyway, you know, he finally came to and got up and couldn't figure out what happened. And I said, well, you hit your head on that when you went out. And boy, he said, it knocked me cold. And anyway, we ended up going down, getting the cows on foot, and bringing them up, got them in. And then the other thing I remember very distinctly was we rode one of the horses down, which was named Ted, down to the creek to take a dip. And anyway, we come back up and the kids, my brother and sister said, well, why don't you ride the horse alone? And I said, okay. Well, we got on the horse, or I did, and I probably wasn't more than 6 years old. And of course, right away, the horse started to run in full bore for the house. And well, they both said, jump, you know. Well, Jesus, a long ways up on that horse. And anyway, I jumped and rolled down the hill, and I thought I was dead. And he said, we don't dare to run her all the way to the house, or the Dad would just kill us. So anyway, that was another experience. And anyway, let's see, we had, okay, the next thing I remember is my brother Pat and me, we had a tame steer that we'd raised up from a bottle, and he was getting, I don't know, probably 600-700 pounds. And the snow was pretty deep, maybe a foot. And well, we decided, you know, rather than go down the pasture and slide down the hill, we'd hook the steer onto the sled, and both of us get on the steer, or on the sled, and let the steer pull us. And which we did. We hooked a rope to the tail of the steer, which wasn't really a good thing to do, but that's about the only way you could pull it unless you had a harness, and we didn't have a harness. Well, I just remember I was on the front of the sled, my brother was on the back, and it went down the lane where we lived there and veered off to the left and went right through the fence. And of course, when he went through the fence, we stopped like a ton of bricks, and we was all tangled up in the wire and everything else. And well, we decided that wasn't really a good plan, so we dropped that one. And I guess the next thing is, you know, every spring we went to the creek, of course, and we cut a willow off of a tree and put a string on it and put a cork on it, and dug a few worms, and we'd go down and fish. And which we'd get bullheads and suckers. Well, we was never one to throw one back in. We had to, so we bring them back up and put them in the horse tank. Well, one day we was down there, all three of us. There was a snake. I don't know, it must have been just a water snake, but it was a pretty long snake. Well, my sister caught the damn thing and she wrapped it around her neck and come up to the house with it. And Dad about had a fit and took it off of her and told her, don't ever do that again. And the snake evidently was just a water snake because it never bit her or anything. And so that was another story. And then we had an incident where we had a cow get stuck in the creek. And of course my father was great, would get in a car and go down and we'll pull it out with the car. Well, we didn't have much for tractors then, other than a big old D John Deere, and it took 2 men and a boy to start it. And anyway, we took a big long rope and we went down. All three of us kids was in the back of the car. I remember it was a 34 Ford, and the 34 Fords had a cloth top instead of a solid top. Well, he backed up to the bank instead of stopping when he should have. That back wheel went over the bank, and that car turned right upside down right in that creek. And here us kids was in there just like drowned rats along with Dad. And well, we all got out of it and got up on the bank. And Dad said, well, I guess we'll have to go to the house and start a tractor and pull it up out of there, which we did, and pulled the cow out then with the tractor, which we should have done to start with, but no, we get it with the car. Well, that ruined that car. I mean, we poked holes in that cloth top and everything, and that was that. And then let's see, one other time. Well, he got another vehicle then, and it was the 35 Ford. It was 34 Ford because he had, and we always went to town on a Saturday night, and Ma got groceries. Dad went to the pool hall, and us kids all went to the show. And we always parked in back of Bemis's Ford garage. There's a big parking lot there then that they used for city parking, because the town was always full on Saturday nights. You could never find a parking place. And anyway, Ma got groceries and put them in the car and went over to the locker plant, which was right across from the Coliseum. And we had a locker there where we kept meat in. And she got the meat for the week and throwed it in the car, and then she come to get Dad and wait for the show to get out. And we all congregated and headed for the car, and we got there and the car wasn't there. Somebody had stolen the car. Groceries, meat, everything. Never did find any trace of that car. We don't know whatever happened to it, whether somebody run it in the river or what. But I remember Jim White was the sheriff then, and of course they notified him right away. Well, hell, they put, roadblocks out over the viaduct and this, that, and everything. Never seen hide nor hair of it. And so that was another experience of growing up that we didn't really know anything about somebody stealing a car, because we never had anything stolen or anything. And I think probably the next thing I can think of is, what we done for entertainment. Well, as a kid, we didn't have any power, and we had a battery radio, and we'd listen to it at night, about 5 o'clock. I think it was Sky King come on or something like that. And we listened to that, and we had, nothing but kerosene lanterns to read by. And that's what we read by, for doing our studies and stuff that we had to do for school. And then pretty much go to bed, because it was dark. Except on Friday night was our entertainment night. And we would else make popcorn and have Kool-Aid. We always had Kool-Aid. And stir that up. And then in the wintertime, Jen would mix up, he'd go out and skim off the cream off the milk in the cans, bring it in, and make a nice cream batter. And then we had one of, one of them little tub ice cream makers that you crank. And we spent our Friday nights doing that and listening to the fights. The fights came on at 9 o'clock, the boxing matches. And that was our entertainment. But we enjoyed the ice cream and listened to the fights, and then we went to bed. And that was our entertainment. I mean, there wasn't, all the other entertainment was outside. I mean, we made our own entertainment as far as kids, sliding downhill and this, that, and the other thing. And in the fall of the year, when Halloween come, we'd go around and get what kids we could. We had an old buggy, one-horse buggy, and we'd load them in there, and we'd go to all the neighbors and Halloween. Well, of course, back then, mostly you got apples and an orange, or somebody would make some good cookies, like Grandma DeFries. And we entertained ourselves that way. And then the school thing, I went all 8 years to this one-room schoolhouse. My brother was 3 years ahead of me, and my sister was 5 years ahead of me. So they, graduated long before I did, but when they graduated, then I had the job of going in the wintertime and getting the fire going before school started. And so I'd head up there. And of course, back then you started the fire with corn cobs, which we had an old shed there that had cobs in it, and then we had some coal in it. And once you got the cobs going, you'd throw the coal in to heat it, and it took an hour or so to get everything going. And then you had to go out and pump a bucket of water for the pupils to drink. We didn't have one of them ones you push on. I mean, you just had a pail with a dipper deal. And that was my job in the morning. And then after I got up into the, I think it was the 7th and 8th grade, we had to take the smaller kids into the cloakrooms, which was the coat rooms. There was the girls and there was the boys, and we'd take them in there and listen to them read. And that was their lesson for reading, while the teacher dealt with another class or whatever. And then our pupils got down to where we had 7 kids left in that little school. And So they was going to shut us down, and instead of that, we consolidated with Brooklyn School, which is over on River Road, and it's right there by that little cemetery as you're going up the hill before you go down over the big tube. And they came over there, and they was I don't know, 15, 16 kids. So that made to where we could have a baseball team and stuff like that. And old Dickerson, they bought him an old, I think it was a 48 Chevrolet panel truck with 3 seats or whatever, and he hauled the kids over from the other school district over there, and then we used that for, after we got it going and had a team going, then we would go over and play Chena, and we would play Kroll School, and what the hell was that other one we played? No, the one over on the brick road. I can't remember the name of it right now. Anyway, there was 3 schools that we playing softball, underhand pitch. And I remember Johnny DeFreeze was the catcher. I pitched. We had Sonny Kaufman on first base. We had Ellen Thomas on second base. And I think Marge was on third base. And then we had, I can't remember all the names now, on the outfield. And, we done pretty good. We beat Cheney a couple times. They beat us a couple times, and we generally done pretty good with the other small schools like Kroll and the one on the brick road. And it was a lot of fun through the summertime. And old Bill Dickerson used that old panel truck, and he would haul us to the games, and everybody had better diamond than we did. The one we had, it was so darn going downhill, you'd lose the ball all the time. So he'd haul us to and he'd also be the umpire. We only had the one umpire, and he stood back at the batters and called strikes and what have you. And it was a lot of fun for all of us in the school. And of course, then in the winter time, they always had a Christmas party, which all the parents come and all the kids. It was a full house. And we put on a couple plays, and everybody had to get up and speak a piece and all that, which was a lot of fun. And in the spring of the year, I think we had an ice cream social or something. And that's kind of what I remember about the one-room schoolhouse and growing up in it. And anyway, I graduated from there. And then I went on to freshman in high school, which I was scared to death to go into because of I've never been in the damn thing. And of course, the only one I had to go with is my brother. And he kind of showed me around the first day, and of course the locker bit and all that stuff was troublesome for me that first week. I could never get the lock on done and all that stuff. And of course you only had like 5 minutes in between classes. Some of them were upstairs, some of them were downstairs. And I just remember, man, I was scared to death until I got a couple weeks into it, and then we got to playing football, and Pat went out for football, and I think he played a tackle or something. And we had Ellerby and Mr. Nelson, the math teacher, and for Fresh South, it was, well, I'd never played football, so I was learning, and that was kind of a farce. And of course, come the sophomore year, Holland said, I'm going to bring you up to the varsity, and you're going to play up here on special teams and what have you. And I said, well, great. Well, then I played on the goddamn varsity team, and then I had to play on the Fresh South team too, see. You know, I got to where the Fresh South team, you know, I played linebacker and I played guard on it, and when they moved me up to varsity, they kept me in the same position, and I played right guard, which was the pulling guard, for running up the middle and through the line. And I remember I loved it. And I didn't weigh nothing, but I was quicker now and could hit hard, you know, and low. So I never really got hurt, only I got a couple cracked ribs once, and I played, you know, with a rib bandage on. And anywho, our sophomore year, or our junior year, in between junior and the senior year, there was a kid by the name of Brent Harper and myself. He played left guard and left linebacker, and I played right guard and right linebacker. And we were voted co-captains at the end of the junior year for the senior year, which was fine. And lo and behold, through the summertime, Brent got leukemia and passed away. So that left me, and of course, then I had to dedicate his helmet and all that stuff to the school at a halftime intermission, which I was scared to death. I'd never done anything like that. The same way with the funeral deal, you know, I hadn't experienced anything like that, and none of the other kids had either. So it was a pretty stressful thing, but we went ahead and played, you know, without him, and I think every game we played that year we dedicated it to him. And we ended up, we didn't win the conference. We couldn't beat Polo. Polo was they had big people on there, and we wasn't that big, and they outmanned us and beat us. I think it was 19-0. And but we was in second place in the conference, and that's what I remember about my football. And let's see. Yeah.